can archaeologists, with spade in hand, verify the biblical version of the conquest of the land of Canaan by the great ancient Israelite commander Joshua? Consider the fabled city of Jericho, whose walls reputedly came crashing, in fact, tumbling down. In 1930, a professor at England's Liverpool University, John Garstang, brought a team to British-controlled Palestine, hoping to shed new light on the ruins of a place called Tel el Sultan, or biblical Jericho. At Jericho, I found evidence of catastrophic destruction and burning, including a collapsed wall that I linked to Joshua's invasion. I dated the conquest to around 1400 BCE, perfectly in line with the traditional biblical chronology that places the Exodus in the mid-1400s. But Garstang's conclusions would not go unchallenged. Adding another layer of controversy was fellow British archaeologist Dame Kathleen Kenyon, who returned to Jericho in 1952. Among fragments of glass from broken Coca-Cola bottles, assorted Byzantine coins, and shards of pottery from the Herodian era, Kenyon identified the so-called Tower of Jericho, an 8.5 meter or 28-foot stone edifice from the pre-pottery Neolithic A period. Dating to around 8000 BCE, it is among the earliest stone structures known to exist in the world. Kenyon discovered the tower, built against the wall inside the ancient town during the excavations of 1952 to 1958. She also found a series of walls at Jericho, dating to the early and middle Bronze Ages. But she dated none to the late Bronze Age, when Joshua is presumed to have destroyed the city. The Middle Bronze Age wall would have existed a century and a half earlier than the traditional biblical chronology of the conquest by Joshua, and 3.5 centuries earlier than the revised chronology put forth by the Baltimore School. Kenyon's dating is still accepted by the majority of archaeologists. She commented, "The archaeological remains indicated that many of the cities said to have been conquered by Joshua were not in existence at the end of the late Bronze Age, nor was there any major change in material culture. Were it not for the Old Testament, no invasion would have been suspected at this time." The clues were in the pots. Even the tiniest pottery fragments. Bear in mind, Mycenaean imports, pyxides, stirrup jars, and amphoriskoi became commonplace by late Bronze Age too, and were imitated by local potters from then on. It was the lack of such imports that Kathleen Kenyon based her conclusions on. Namely, Jericho was uninhabited at the time Joshua supposedly conquered it. Nevertheless, advocates of the Bible as genuine history weren't quite ready to give up. Archaeologist Bryant Wood, for example, noticed that Kenyon hadn't actually examined Canaanite pottery at the site. Instead, she based her conclusions on the absence of imported pottery that might have been expected in the late Bronze Age. Garstang's pottery, by contrast, did in fact check out to be from the late Bronze Age, dating precisely to 1400 BCE. There's some additional evidence we would do well to consider. Bear in mind, the previous excavations of Garstang and Kenyon had unearthed storage jars full of grain, evidence that the siege had occurred soon after the spring harvest. According to a detail in the biblical account, an inhabitant of the city named Rahab sheltered 2 Israelite spies on her roof under the flax, which was up there drying just after the harvest. It's telltale evidence that Joshua's invasion would indeed have taken place in the spring. Moreover, since the jars were full, it's clear that the siege was very short, consistent with the biblical account of just 7 days. As for the fallen walls, both Garstang and Kenyon noticed that the entire Jordan River Rift Valley is seismic and that earthquake activity is not uncommon. For his part, Bryant Wood observed that one area of the wall, which, unlike Kenyon, he dated to around 1400 BCE, had not collapsed. This is again consistent with the biblical record, indicating that the house of Rahab, literally built into the casement wall, was spared by the Israelites. Furthermore, the Bible records that after its conquest, the entire city was burned. While Kenyon dated the destruction 150 years earlier, she nonetheless pointed out the remains of the fire. This red and white streak is the remains of a tremendous fire so fierce that the 10-foot thick walls were burnt through and through. But just when the tide might be turning in favor of the biblical account, new data came in. The actual remains of the grain in the jars was carbon dated. The results? Not 1400 BCE, but indeed around 1550 BCE, just as Kenyon had asserted. There was, we should point out, an error factor of up to 110 years, but that still wouldn't be enough. Nevertheless, carbon dating has been shown to be off before, and it just might come down to which science you trust, carbon-14 or archaeology. After thousands of years, it looks like the battle for Jericho isn't over yet.